Thanks, Meg. Yeah, super excited to be here. No, happy to be joining from Seattle and assuring you that it is still me, even though I have longer hair than I ever have before, whether it was military or that picture. Just excited to chat today.
Did you have the reactionary, I'm not cutting my hair that short anymore because you can't tell me to? Because my husband's in the middle of that and his is longer than mine right now.
I hear that. No, similarly, it was a relational thing. My partner said, like, I was with you through the military. I've been with you throughout the military. Like, I've never seen what you with hair look like. So, I'm very nervous about this first time journey. But that's what that's just one of the other pieces of transition, sort of transitioning to civilian life. So
Oh
yeah,
yeah, absolutely. Oh man. All right. So let tell us a little bit about that transition. What was it like to move from the Navy to Expedia Group? And what do you think motivated you to pursue a career in technology after your service concluded?
sure, yeah. Well, first things first, Expedia has been and was my first stop out of the military. Prior to Expedia, I was in the Navy, most recently stationed out on the West Coast here in the U.S. on the USS Seawolf. My partner got a great opportunity here in Seattle, and after, as is many of the military stories, sort of 5 moves in 5 years, or following me all around the country. We opted to forego another move, and so I opted to get out. And all I knew that I wanted to do was be in Seattle because we had done
Mhm.
the long distance thing before, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I just started hunting and pecking, I think, like most folks do in their tradition transition. And one thing that somebody ahead of me sort of offered as advice was, hey, try and do one thing a day. And that turned out to be probably the best piece of advice that I got as I embraced this like scary journey of like figure out what I want to do next. Sometimes it was more than one thing a day, but it was always at least one thing a day, a happy hour, an email, a job application, a networking event. And it started with folks who I knew. Oh, I used to work with this person, or this is a family friend, or this is somebody, a friend of a friend. And it grew outward from there. And Expedia really came from there. A friend of a friend of a friend of a friend said, I recommend you go talk to somebody at Expedia. I know this guy who's involved with veterans at Expedia. So I went, I reached out to that person on LinkedIn. I said, hey, I'm transitioning. I'd love to learn a little bit more about the company and the industry. I had a great coffee chat. And like many coffee chats, absolutely nothing came from it, like other than it was a great chat
Yeah.
in terms of sort of job. Um, but I followed up and they said, oh, I'll introduce you to somebody else. And I had another coffee chat at Expedia and they introduced me to somebody else. And on my fifth coffee chat, I came as I had many times out here in Seattle. And I was waiting with the sort of secretary, and the person came out and we introduced ourselves. And I told them a little bit about myself. And we hadn't even walked downstairs for coffee yet. And they said, let me just stop you right there. I don't really understand what you did, but it seemed hard and I needed some help yesterday on a project. Like, do you have time to talk to some people? And I did 4 back-to-back interviews that day. And the next day, recruiting called me and said, like, are you a real person? And like, could you apply for this job because you just interviewed for it? And 2 days later, they offered me the job.
Oh my
So
God.
very grateful to Expedia sort of for taking the risk. And I've been doing the Expedia thing ever since.
I love that story. That's nice. Okay, let's talk about some of the mindset that military experience gives you. Obviously, we're talking mostly to other vets and military spouses at this point, so thankfully, it's less of a can you explain like how that works to civilians. But what do you think are some of the more valuable like skill sets or mindsets from your military experience that have paid dividends with your roles at Expedia Group?
You know, my thinking, I guess, on this has evolved a little bit over time. I'll share when I started at Expedia, the thing I thought would be the most valuable skill or mindset was a technical skill or a technical mindset. I thought, man, there's all sorts of engineering on a submarine. I'm sure I can do engineering or technical things at a technology company. It's just like a different kind of science. But we were all about, many parts, especially the US military, are so technical. I thought that'll be great. Um, and the thing I was most nervous about was the people. How do you work with people when you don't have sort of their rank right here or their name right there? Who
Yeah.
am I going to know? Like, can that person tell me to do this thing, or should I even listen to that person, or can I tell this person to do that thing?
Well, it's an
Uh,
entirely different social structure. Like it's
100%.
literally an entirely different world.
100%.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I actually found it was the complete opposite. I actually
Yeah.
found like the technology part I found was the most challenging and the least transferable.
Yeah.
And then I think at a tech company, oftentimes it's much more complicated than, can you do CSS or do you have some of these like basic skills? And I found the people part the easiest. And I would say that's probably at the top of my personal list of transferable skills. I think people are mostly people, whether you bury them underwater in a submarine or you're at a forward operating base or you're working in a platoon, like, or you're working in a corporate office. Like,
Mhm.
people generally don't want to be told to do a thing. They want to feel included in a thing. People generally want to do the right thing.
I'm
Uh,
sorry. People generally don't want to be told to do a thing is just
I would
rich
say,
coming from someone who was in the military. Like you
yeah,
realize what that says, right?
I think so. But I think those of us in the military, and also I think military spouses in a lot of ways, I think you experience that. Yes, there are ranks
Yeah.
and chain of
Like
command and
you'll be told
orders.
what to do. It's like you want to know you're listening to the right person.
100%. And that
Yeah.
person cares about you and that person wants you to be successful and they're not, just
Yeah.
doing it because they don't want you to do it themselves, and I think those things are all the same in corporate
Yeah.
life and at a tech company.
Yeah, of course. Okay, if veterans are, let's talk to veterans who are just starting to build their professional networks. What steps would you recommend they take to start making connections? I loved your advice of like one thing every day. So what break that down for us? What do you think people should be doing if they are just at the start of that?
Yeah, I think something that we cannot talk about enough is the fact that other veterans and the extended veteran community like is your built-in network. Like I have family members who went to colleges or who all live in the same place and they use those things as their network, as their professional network. Oh, so and so, his cousin works at this place, they helped me get a job, or so and so went to my university. Like, find the veterans or the extended veteran community at the place that you wanted to be. So many of the things in my transition, after I got over the hurdle of sort of and ran through the list of everybody I knew, began to be reaching out to people who I didn't know, but we shared some piece of veterans in common. I emailed so many submariners, so many people from the Navy, and then eventually it was just anybody with past military experience that was at the organization that I was interested in. And at some point in my transition, I was just cold emailing these people on LinkedIn, "Hey, I'm a transitioning veteran," and I was tracking it in a big Excel, and I was so stunned to find that almost 50% of the time people were responding and
Wow.
saying, "I don't know you at all, but we both share this network. We both share this common bond. I am one of the few in the military, military veterans in my workplace. You are a military veteran, and we are our network." And I
Mhm.
think I think that for those starting to build their network, I would at least share that 100% worked for me and has continued to be so. And I would offer that very
Yeah.
openly, like, reach out to the folks at the places that you're interested in. And even if it's just interested in learning, like, the extended sort of military community is your network. And I don't think we often use it as our professional network as much as we could.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. I would say based on granted limited experience, I was not married to my husband while he was in the military, so mine's all, him post. But knowing active military spouses, it is absolutely it's a transition that that is different for everybody in very unexpected ways.
Yeah,
And I think you made a ton of excellent points about how like it seems so different at first when you get out, but it's a different way of having to learn to interact with people because you don't, like you said, you don't have that shorthand of like, here's my name and my rank and what I do. And we don't even have to have a handshake for you and me to have an understanding of base level who we each are in this organization. So
totally.
pulling the labels off, I mean, it's like, okay, go make dinner in that kitchen, but none of the soup cans have labels on them, so figure it out. Like that would be terrifying. I totally get it.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, now this question I think is a little bit similar, but how can veterans identify and connect with mentors who can guide them in their target industries or career paths? I love this because I feel like a lot of times when you come out of the military, a lot of people see what they're doing or what they're transitioning to as non-traditional because probably a lot of other people in that same office have not also been in their combat boots. But do you think that there are different ways? Do you think that there's a difference between networking and finding a mentor? To me,
I think
networking
they're
is trying to meet
probably,
other people, but to me, mentor is like trying to find somebody who's like 10-ish years ahead of the path I want to be on. Is
hmm,
that Does that roughly translate as far as you go?
I think, yeah, I think that's definitely part of it. And I would agree with you. I think they are ultimately separate, or we think about them as separate. Um, but I do think they're probably related. And my experience has been that they're related, that things that started as I want to get to know you for some sort of mutual or personal, professional development opportunity, like getting a job or getting a referral or getting a leg into this organization or getting knowledge,
Mhm.
which I think was most of my networking journey. I think mentorship, this more personal, typically one on one and investment directly in you, I think can often grow out of, something that starts as a just networking relationship. And I would say for me, one of the things that helped with that was when I started approaching the networking as less about, hey, I need a job from you, and more about, I am interested in learning from you.
Yeah.
And I got a lot more sort of, I was able to grow my network faster because I found a lot more people willing to talk to me and help me out. If it wasn't, the starting place wasn't, well, I have to hire you onto my team, or I have to put my neck out for you and I don't even know you yet. And it
Yeah,
became
it's not as
more
big an
about
ask.
like, yeah, definitely not. And it became more, well, sure, I'll tell you about my industry. Or sure, I actually do know somebody at this other company and I'd be happy to refer you over there now that I know you a little bit. And when it became less about, hi, I'm looking at this job on your team and I saw you're a veteran, or hi, I'm looking at this job at your company, like, could you give it to me? Not that there isn't a place for that or there is an opportunity for that. I think if you're looking for the mentorship path, I think, pursuing that, hey, I want to learn from you rather than, hey, I need this action from you,
Hmm.
I think is, served me well, certainly. I think in kind of looking for how can we break off and find opportunities for mentors.
I like that. I think I completely agree. I love this question because a lot of the times when we have chats about mentorship, it becomes very official. People feel like you have to like,
Mm,
you know, an engraved invitation of like, here, will you be my mentor? And it's like, it doesn't have to be that stuffy, it doesn't have to be that planned in advance. Like you said, if you are networking is just making business friends. That's literally all it is.
mm,
So if you are making friends in the way that most people make friends, which is to follow your interest. Oh yeah, I've talked to this guy and he told me he's into blah blah blah, and I was like, what? Say more words. So like,
totally.
if you pursue it like that, I think it's probably. Do you think it's a little bit different than like necessarily? I don't want to say like fraternizing, but like networking in a military capacity.
Yeah, 100%. And I also think the scope is so much wider than maybe we give ourselves credit for. I have found, so many non-military, individuals in the corporate space who are eager to mentor somebody who, oh, I'm intrigued by this military experience, or I married somebody who previously was in the military, or my parent was in the military, that has this ally, soft spot, interest in
Yeah.
you or in us, whether you're
Even just
a
that
military
curiosity.
veteran or
Yeah.
spouse,
Mhm.
in kind of a unique way, and is sort of interested in pouring into kind of that community or our community. And I think that's another thing that sort of I wish I would have told myself, hey, don't just look for mentors who are like, oh, I used to be on a submarine just like you. There are lots of folks who, never did that, and who are more than eager to sort of provide that mentorship. And as mentorship evolves, probably mentorship that was more valuable for me at that moment in my career than just finding somebody who sort of looks like me.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a ton of sense. Okay, let's talk about the challenges involved in moving from a military environment, which I think is unsurprisingly to many very structured, moving into the much more flexible world of corporate culture. What were some of those challenges like for you, and how did you handle them?
Yeah, gosh, so weird, especially being at a technology company. I'll speak for a moment just about sort of what I think is the stereotypical kind of Western global tech company of like, you know, free food and flexible work and sit on a couch and bring your dog and come in anytime you want and leave anytime you want was a big change for me from being like
Yeah.
this is what time muster is and you better show up with your
In these clothes
boots
or
tied.
else.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. uh what were the man so there were challenges, but I would say like a lot of them are um I would say a lot of them can be positive. I would say like there's a lot of power or a lot of benefit in balancing. Certainly, you have responsibilities for your new career and your new life and or your family or finances, but just this ability that like if you don't like the job, you can leave it is like a
Yeah.
new mindset from being in the military,
Yeah.
which I think is a powerful thing to sort of try what you want. And I don't know that we talk enough about try this thing. And if you don't like this thing, like you could try something else. And there are lots of opportunities, through things, that Power to Fly helps highlight of, hey, here's ways to kind of try other things. I think
Yeah.
one explicit challenge, though, maybe for me, transitionally, kind of tactically, was knowing when to leave. I had
Oh,
this like mentality of like from the military of like, you should be the last one to leave, or so people think you're working
first one
hard.
there, last one left. Yep. Yep.
Totally.
Yep.
And I think I learned over time that it was more about, am I delivering impact? Like, am I adding value? And I think that's a difference a little bit, sort of
Mhm.
from military work to corporate work, where they're really
Yeah.
measuring, like, are you adding value or impact? And if you are, whether you leave at 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. or 4 p.m. doesn't, matter as much as are you driving value. I think it's both a great way for military folks, and I see this all the time as I have hired them or worked with them or mentored them myself. I see them doing some of the same things that did, which was like it is a great way to differentiate yourself. Like you're staying, you're eager, you're working hard. But I would
Well, and
say
there's
like
usually a
I
bit
think
of like discipline or drive that even if you're not personally like lit up inside at the mission of whatever you're working on, you can still do it. Like I've seen it in action. It's just like, no, I'm
100%.
here and we're doing the thing. So that is hugely valuable, but you're absolutely right. It's like knowing the art is knowing when to stop.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. 100%.
Okay, as somebody who has worked on the Vets Board for Expedia, as well as the
Hmm.
U.S. Naval Academy Alumni Association, what role do you see veteran-focused networks and organizations playing in supporting a successful career transition from the military into civilian life?
Yeah, I think they're important formal ways to help start that networking engagement. They're ways for folks who are sitting on our couches or in a job that we don't like to go to our phone or go to our computer and Google what are other veterans at this org. And I don't have to know somebody and I don't have to get referred to somebody. I can start through some of these organizations. And that certainly was the case for me. And that certainly was why I ended up sort of involved with some of these organizations later because they helped me. There were places where, oh, I went to this monthly meeting or this networking breakfast or this group of veterans and allies here at Expedia Group because it helped me get plugged in or it helped me grow my network or grow my career. So I think that's an important role that they play, kind of being that formal space rather than some of the informal, hey, this, guy was a buddy of mine when we, were in Kuwait or whatever. Like those are some formal ways where you can start with looking at what does Microsoft offer? What does Google have? What does Apple created that can be
Yeah.
sort of launching pads for sort of how do you learn more about an organization or break in?
Yeah, like that familiarity of there being a framework to help explore those options. Because I mean, it's like you
Totally.
said, even just the freedom to say, I don't like this, I want to leave now is massive. And when that wasn't an option, at least not until your contract was up, it's very difficult for somebody who's not signed a document like that to understand how that transition feels. So it makes a ton of sense that like you have all the choices, but you also have all the choices. Like that's
Yeah.
both awesome and scary. So yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it makes a ton of sense that any group that's going to kind of ease you from all the structure to no structure, or less, I should say, is going to have that degree of familiarity to kind of help ease you into it. I like that.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Plus, I don't know about you, but if there's one thing I know about generally a lot of vets, they don't necessarily want to ask for help
Mm.
a lot. Y'all are
Yep.
real
Yep.
independent. So it can be I'm sure it's very helpful to have a bit of a framework of like, okay, and now we're going to help you with this because it's something that's happening. So I'm sure
100%.
that's a little bit easier to deal with. Um,
100%.
okay, this one, I have a couple other questions up my sleeve in case this that runs short, but I don't think it will. If you could give your past self one piece of career advice from transitioning from the military into corporate life, what do you wish you could tell yourself?
Mm. Just one. I was listening to, I guess, Robert from Co-Platoon just before this, and they were sharing one of the questions was around, um, how we think about things, and one of them was, "Hey, you should just know yourself." Like it was kind of that was the basics of it, and I would say for me that would be the advice I would give myself. I would say, don't worry what other people are doing. Don't worry about keeping up with the Joneses. Don't worry about did I get as high paying of a first job as I could have? Do I get to travel as much in my role as I want to? Am I on the corporate career path, that is as good as that one?
Mm-hmm.
I would recommend to myself, hey, focus on like, are you enjoying like the career that you have set out on? Are you meeting your financial or family or personal goals? And more about are you knowing yourself than is this as good as somebody else or something else? I think that's something certainly that I have learned over time and found even with a fantastic set of like support structure here at Expedia and an incredible time that I would not change. Early on, I was fighting the urge to find like, well, what about that thing, or what about that person, or what about this opportunity over there? Did I miss? And so I would
Mm-hmm.
say, kind of focusing on knowing yourself and seeing is this working for me, not is this, better than everybody else. I think was a thing I had to break a little bit from the military, where it is a little bit more, you know, did you make right on time? Did you get promoted, early? Did you win this award? There is a little bit more of a spirit of competition. I think one of the benefits of corporate life is you have more opportunity to curate it to what matters for you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so that's what I would give maybe as advice, at least to my past self.
I'm trying real hard not to knock you down a peg or two, but I asked for one answer and you still kind of gave me two, actually, if you're thinking
Oh
about it.
no.
No, truly you did, because like as you were talking, you're thinking like, so you're talking about like knowing yourself, right? And a lot of what the military does, at least from what I have seen as an outside perspective, a lot of it is it kind of gives you a framework for how to be a person, how to,
Mm,
get up, do the thing, train for a job, go do the job with the thing. And it also gives you a very, like intentionally, a very strong sense of I am a cog in the machine, but I'm an important cog in the machine. And this is what I'm doing. And what I am doing every day, no matter what it is contributing towards this goal that we all signed up for, which is huge. But there's not necessarily a ton of emphasis on the individual within that. So it's really easy to grow up within the military without realizing that you're not necessarily always developing that sense of self. So you're right. Like it is a lot about like, you do want to have that inner focus because you're not just trying to keep up with the Joneses potentially. You're also trying to figure out what you actually want. Those are two completely different things. So I mean
yeah, absolutely.
that's massive. I mean, like there's so many layers to this topic and to this area and to this process for people's lives that like it's wild. Like I love that we get to do a whole month focus on vets because the transition out of military to civilian life is incredibly layered, incredibly layered. So I love this.
Definitely. And I think sometimes it happens to us because the mission changes. And I think
Mm-hmm.
so much of the mission when you're in the military is the mission, like is ingrained with what you do professionally. And transitioning to corporate life, I hear all the time here at Expedia, folks ask, well, I miss the connections that I used to have, or I miss doing this bigger than self thing that I did in the military, and therefore this thing is not as good. And I think for me, I found is just that the mission changed. Like I used to do this one mission, now I do many missions. Work is one
Mhm.
part of my new mission, but I have a different family mission than I had when I was in the military. And I have a
Exactly.
different friendship mission than I had when I was in the military. And my day is more missions than sort of it was when I was just doing the military thing. And I think that's okay. And I think thinking about that when we transition is good.
Yes. Oh, okay. Love, love, love all of this. All right. We have a couple minutes left before we got to transition off stage, but one last question for me. If people only remember one thing from this last half hour, what do you want that one thing that they take with them to be?
Hmm.
I know this is a hard one, but it's one of my
Yeah.
favorite questions for a reason.
One thing. Um, I would say one thing on the topic is use LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Like that's like a real tactical thing. We've talked about it, several different other things, but like I think the power of LinkedIn cannot be understated, and a lot of the things that we talked about military veterans can do through LinkedIn, like whether
Yeah.
it's communicating and connecting or keeping track of or researching. There's all sorts of sessions, including here in Power to Fly with things, hey, here's how you can optimize, here's, recruiters' takes on LinkedIn. Take advantage of those. Like it really is a big tool in the toolkit for, almost all roles, almost all industries, almost all organizations, and certainly at least for our and I think the more we use it as veterans, the stronger our network becomes. So I think if there was only one thing and you were like, who cares where that person's from or like how their transition was, what do I do for mine? What should I take away? What's one thing? I would
Yeah.
say don't sleep on LinkedIn. I think that's a good one.
I like it. I like that a lot. I will also add, as you are doing that, to piggyback off of something that you had said earlier, you don't have to be using it correctly. Okay.
Mm,
Just test some stuff. Try it. See what's going
totally,
on. The mission is not a failure if you go on LinkedIn for an hour and you don't automatically have a job. So,
totally.
as somebody who is, married to somebody who's very all or nothing, just give it time. It took you a
Absolutely.
couple days to catch up in basic. It's gonna take you a couple days to catch up now. So it's all right. All
Absolutely.
right. Jordan, thank you so much. It's been wonderful to get to talk with you. I'm really, really excited to see where this conversation can go next. And I love working with the Expedia team. So I very much hope we'll get to do this again soon.
Awesome. Same. Thanks, Meg.
You're welcome.